Hey guys. How are you? Hope you are doing great, and yeah, I have a great story for you guys today. We will see how a person got reincarnated in Attack on Titan world. With Chakra and Mangekyo Sharingan and Susanoo in his arsenal, how he will change the world of Attack on Titan. Chapter 11, 1 week later. Instructor Keith didn't say anything about it, just looked at Takashi with a calm expression. Takashi originally intended to let Eren prove to everyone that he could pass the test with a damaged belt, but then thought that he couldn't let something happen that would mark a significant change in history. Could Eren be eliminated this time? What assures Takashi that everything will continue to happen in the same way? Eren wasn't a bit clear if there was any difference, so trusting Takashi and seeing that Instructor Keith didn't say anything about it, he put on Takashi's belt. Takashi's behavior made him slightly aware of something and gave him confidence. Similarly, Armin was pensive. Mikasa on his side felt inexplicable. The spectators also did not understand the approach of changing belts. Instructor Keith looked at it deeply, but it didn't stop Eren from changing the belt on the spot until the end. Eren Jiga, are you ready? Instructor Keith Shades looked at Eren with fixed eyes. Yes, sir. Eren replied with determination. Get ready, get him up. Instructor Keith said solemnly. Eren slowly stood up, shaking occasionally, but overall he was stable. Is it that easy? Eren felt a little unbelievable. Was what I practiced yesterday fake? How is this possible? Bravo! Way to go! Everyone celebrated Eren's success happily. Ignoring the comments from the other corporals, Instructor Keith announced, "Congratulations on passing the exam." Yes. That's great. Eren couldn't help but shout into the balance machine. Everyone was infected by Eren's emotions, and many people cheered together. Congratulations Eren, let's change the world together. Takashi thought with an inevitable happy smile. Instructor Keith approached Takashi and deliberately asked, "What did you find?" Eren's belt is broken. Keith took Eren's belt from Takashi's hand and looked it over for a while. It turned out that the equipment was faulty, the metal buckles on your belt were rusted. This is the first time in many years I've seen something like this. I'll have to add your belt to the maintenance list. Explained Instructor Keith to everyone and especially to Eren. Does that mean he had been trying it with faulty equipment? No way. Suddenly, everyone realized what had actually happened from the instructor's words, but Takashi was puzzled. In the original story, Keith immediately mentioned where Eren's belt was damaged and points out that this hadn't happened in many years. This was all too suspicious. The belt has never been damaged before, and Keith touches it only twice to determine where it is broken. Isn't that suspicious? It really is a very good performance that could fool everyone but Takashi. However, he could only roll his eyes when he heard the instructor's words. All things considered, he surely was the one who handed Eren a defective belt, but still Takashi couldn't understand why Instructor Keith did that. Was it because he most likely knew Eren's mother? Takashi vaguely recalled that it was for that specific reason. Still, he wasn't stupid enough to expose Instructor Keith. In the military, a mere corporal can't point fingers at someone like Keith if he's guilty about what happened. That's all for today. Finally all of you have become soldiers. Train hard and show what you are made of. After today, the actual training will be arranged, and a week later, the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment will be issued. Instructor Keith looked at the excited people and scoffed, "Yes, there are only 295 people left now. I hope there will be more than 200 people when you graduate, it would be a miracle. Everyone was silent, and after a while of free practice, it was time for lunch. Takashi went to the dining room with Eren, Mikasa and Armin. On the way, Eren hesitated. Do you want to ask me when I found out your belt was broken? Takashi asked proactively. Well, you're right. Regardless, thanks for today. Eren said gratefully. I found out your belt was bad when I was instructing you yesterday afternoon. There's a slight abnormal tremor in the dangling cable. Which reminds me of the first day when I helped you put on your belts. Takashi's face was not flushed from the lies and he started blathering nonsense with his eyes wide open. Why didn't you say so before? Mikasa somewhat angrily interjected. Eren and Armin also looked at Takashi. Of course Eren didn't blame Takashi, he was just a bit puzzled as to why he didn't tell him until today, moments before the test. Takashi suddenly stopped and looked at the trio of young men. If you had given up before trying again, I would not consider you someone who would fight with me later. You can take it as a test to determine your will. Sufferings help us grow and I will from now on change the world by your side. Eren smiled as he understood Takashi's intentions. Even at the end he always stood up and tried to improve the situation. He pushed everyone to open their minds and support each other. Those words changed the morale of many who passed the test today. I see. Eren nodded and looked at Takashi in a different way. He felt that the fellow only cared about changing the world regardless of friendship. He thought similarly, just now he realized that he found someone with the same determination to eliminate all the titans of this world and find true freedom. Armin opened his mouth slightly, not knowing how to evaluate Takashi's behavior. Mikasa on her side looked at him harshly, unsatisfied with the fact that Takashi hid it for a long time if he knew it in the beginning. Takashi patted Eren on the shoulder and said earnestly, if you sweat more now, you will bleed less in the future. The difficulties in front of us are just goals, this is not a reason to resent and retreat to our dreams. That which can't defeat us, will only make us stronger on our way, Eren. You seem to have a lot to think about. I really didn't know that at all and it was just my guess. Also, I'm sure it was something Instructor Keith wouldn't let go of. Takashi took his food, ignoring the looks from the trio who didn't know what to say and wandered off to another place to eat. After the morning test, everyone worked on their fitness for a while and then it was time for lunch. In the afternoon, in the dining room, Takashi received a piece of bread and rice soup and went in search of a place to sit. Takashi, here. Thomas greeted Takashi with a smile. Takashi looked at Thomas along with two other young men beside him smiling amicably. Connie, Jean, Thomas who was at the table had reserved a place for him. He sat down directly, and Connie asked curiously, how did you know there was something wrong with Eren's belt? Takashi smiled and said, it was something that surprised me, I just thought that Eren's belt was something different from everyone else's and I lent him mine to verify my guesses. Do I have to tell you that I've seen the anime? Takashi thought to himself. Connie was speechless, feeling that Takashi was somewhat superficial. However, Jean, who didn't want to talk about Eren's business, interjected, are we about to start training with the three-dimensional maneuvering team? Thomas explained, it will take a week for our three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to arrive. In this week, in addition to physical training in the morning, we also have to attend a theoretical class on the engine and the internal mechanism of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment in the afternoon. The use of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment is not simple and the recruits must also understand its structure and principles. In the afternoon, Balancing is practiced again. This exercise will last for 1 week. At the end of 1 week the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment will be handed over. At that time the training course will officially start. The official class schedule is as follows: wake up at 6:30 a.m., bathe for a maximum of half an hour, run for half an hour and have breakfast for half an hour. Theory classes for the training of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment and balance training. In the second year, riding training and physical combat would begin. There are major evaluations each year. The first year would be snow training, the second year forest marching and the third year actual combat exercises. A week had passed since he arrived in this world. As could be natural, he had to adapt to the requirements that one had to have in order to survive the mighty titans that awaited him later on. Takashi, who until now had been sitting quietly with his eyes closed, took a deep breath, finishing his training for the night. I guess it was another day full of new things, wasn't it, Takashi? As if expecting his words to be answered, all Takashi got in return was the whistling of the air in the distance and the chirping of crickets in the bushes nearby. He hadn't had a quiet respite since he came to this world. The first days of waking up in Takashi's body he used to convince himself that everything he was experiencing was real and not a product of his imagination. On the other hand, the information about the gifts that the roulette gave him was engraved in his memory. Today, he was finally about to open the Mangekyo Sharingan and see if there was any kind of change just by activating them. Clenching his fists, Takashi activated only the appearance of his eyes and it was as easy as breathing. Feeling a small stream of chakra enter his sight, the change was very slow but steady, and in the blink of an eye, 3 spores were in Takashi's eyes. Since the only thing he had to offer in return to access the Susanoo's power was part of his lifespan depending on the form he unleashed, there was nothing else to do to activate his power. Takashi closed his eyes tightly and then opened both eyes slowly. Just as he felt those demonic eyes had made an appearance, he said, "It doesn't feel abnormal at all. The sight could be a little better, but maybe it's just my own perception having the wrong idea of what these eyes mean in this world." This is also the first time Takashi activates the Mangekyo Sharingan on his eyes. According to the information he had, there was no cost for just activating them as long as you didn't make use of the Susanoo power. These eyes are cool. I wouldn't be surprised if those who looked at them and knew of their power would consider studying them more closely. Considering what happened to Eren in the first few chapters of the saga, I was a little afraid of being considered someone just like Eren. Takashi didn't have any regenerative powers as crazy as Eren Yaja, who was able to regenerate limbs as easily as breathing. Chakra also had no such advanced regenerative function, so Takashi had to be very careful and make use of his power to save every part of his body at all costs in times of danger. On the other hand, there were the memories about the history of this world. Takashi was really puzzled why those memories were impossible for him to remember. Considering this world and his abilities, he would have generated a major change, as the voice told him long before he came to this world. If he really had to change the future, Takashi was sure he would do his best to improve everyone's end. Right now he had a new mindset about his power, and with all that in mind, he was seriously determined not to falter in the face of adversity. At the end of the day, this is his story and he will do everything he can to support Eren and the others in their quest for freedom. Unconsciously, a week passed in silence. The gendarmerie staff finally delivered the required three-dimensional maneuvering equipment for each soldier. Everyone looked at the boxes of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment stacked in front of everyone with burning eyes. Takashi was also a little excited. With this device he could move and go to the sky. Just like taking a driver's license test, after learning the basic theoretical knowledge, you must get in the car to practice. and if you drive a lot, you will naturally become an experienced old driver. The same goes for the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. After completing the required basic training and learning all the concepts, practical training will begin today. To be honest, everyone was anxious. Aaron's eyes were shining. God, a child's dream about to come true. Takashi is also looking forward to the moment. Everyone knows how beautiful this thing is in animation. The equipment was quickly distributed and given to each person. Takashi felt it was very light once equipped on his body, the result of many upgrades and improvements to the equipment over time. Before everyone was happy, more than a dozen instructors arrived with their respective three-dimensional maneuvering equipment on their bodies, led by Bald Keith. "Are you guys excited?" Instructor Keith asked with a dark face. Some of the noisy training soldiers stopped talking. Instructor Keith didn't speak any further and pressed the trigger on the knife handle. Shut. A repairman on one side of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment flew straight out, pulled out a telescopic rope and stuck it into a tree trunk, and then the sound of gas jets sounded and the repairman retracted again. Instructor Keith pointed to the deep hole in the tree trunk punctured by the anchor and said coolly, "Look, what will happen if you get stuck with this fastener?" Even though it was mentioned in theory class, some guys don't care every year, but they will eventually learn when they get seriously hurt. Everyone looked at the hole in the tree trunk and didn't speak, and some people took a cold breath. This thing was more dangerous than they thought. Chapter 12, Call Me Captain Takashi. The three-dimensional maneuvering equipment can be very dangerous to some extent, overlooking all the risks that a single mistake can have when moving with this device, and the most delicate are the firing piston, the control unit that makes up the trigger, and the mobility of the whole equipment. The hooks that fire the spatial maneuvering unit are the most important of all, and from which many of the users end up dead or seriously injured. It is known to be aimed using the waist, since the two firing pistons are located there. Once the target is in sight and the point at which to shoot has been calculated, the main trigger arranged on the handles of the hardened steel swords must be operated. Each trigger is responsible for activating its respective piston. Once done, a hook will shoot out and hook on the solid surface, but preferably vertical. After this, the user can operate the mechanism again to generate traction and move thanks to the mechanical impulse resulting from the tension of the rope, and so on until the desired distance has been covered. On the other hand, the user also has the possibility to stop the pulling exercise of the mechanism and unhook the end of the rope that is in contact with the surface. This thing can pierce trees, walls, and even the tough skin of titans to hold ropes without breaking and return to its place. What will happen if it shoots directly at a human? You only have to look at the sharp hook anchor that carried a metallic cold light to know that it's deadly stuff. If you mistakenly shoot at a fellow human's neck, he'll most likely die without knowing what happened. These are the words that Instructor Keith emphasized the most. In the previous theory class, the instructor also made a special reminder. In the previous training, most of the injuries while training with the team were due to various falls, but there were still a small number of recruits who injured their teammates because they were not careful when shooting the hook anchor during training. However, since this type of accident is much smaller than the likelihood of several falls and some certain deaths, it did not draw much attention from the general public. Instructor Keith said sternly with a cold face, "Remember everything, you are soldiers and the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment is a weapon, not a toy. In future training, I don't want any idiot to get hurt by his own weapon, understand?" Keith Shades knew that many would die no matter how many words he spit out now. It's not something that can be controlled after all. "Understood, sir." Everyone replied with a serious expression. Seeing this, Instructor Keith started the class, giving more lectures before class. After giving a speech, he told some more experiences about many precautions. All right, let me see what everyone has learned. Equip yourself with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment in 5 minutes. Yes. A week of training has made the discipline of this group of teenagers much better, being two completely different people than when they arrived at the training corps. Today the day is relatively cool, the sky is cloudy and the sunlight makes people feel calmer, managing to be comfortable in this test. By order of the instructor, the soldiers in training, who were divided into squads, began to equip themselves with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. However, this is much more difficult than everyone imagined. The three-dimensional maneuvering equipment consists of many parts such as ejector, transmitter, fans, main body, compressed gas tank that had to be very fixed, trigger, belt structure well put on the body and retractable rope. After 5 minutes, many people were still not ready, until the instructors demonstrated several times to support the squads, and only then everyone was gradually equipped. Takashi used the knowledge from the theory classes to check that the equipment was in good condition at least twice. This was necessary, otherwise who can assure him that a bald guy won't hand him a broken piece of equipment? Once in practice, there is no room for backing out, and it's not like he's too excited to use his Susanoo in front of everyone. While Takashi was equipping, he was mentioning each of the parts in order for the others to keep up with him. He remembered special things and simpler ways to equip the equipment on the body. Under Takashi's guidance, his entire squadron successfully completed the task in less than 7 minutes. The instructors who came to check the performance of Takashi's squadron said nothing and just watched how everything went quickly, which surprised them a lot. In general, the soldiers of the training corps have completed the task one after another, happily looking at the equipment in their body that they have dreamed of so much. Then, with the help of the instructors, the compressed gas tanks were filled. All the soldiers, once they had filled their tanks with compressed gas, split up with their squads and went into the forest to begin practice. After all, it would be much more dangerous to be among more than 200 people in one place than to be in a small squad. The principle of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment is not complicated. It is enough to press the trigger and aim correctly with the waist to generate a clean and correct shot. After pressing the trigger located on the handle of the sword, the corresponding transmitter on the waist fires the anchor, which is usually attached to a titan or building, and then uses compressed gas to drive the fan and the anchor that retracts the retractable cable. To move the body at high speeds, increasing three-dimensional mobility to fight. The team's belt distributes weight throughout the body, allowing for more dexterous mobility. Soldiers can adjust their posture in the air by manipulating the belts at the waist, legs and feet. In addition, the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment can be used to move in forests and buildings by gliding, balancing nimbly once the user is accustomed to it. But using it on flat terrain is very dangerous. Takashi knew that this equipment could carry up to 2 people without showing noticeable faults other than weight. It was not known exactly how many people it could carry, but the ideal at risk would be 2 children or an adult, for mobility and speed rather than weight. However, all those who looked at themselves flying through the air, the reality soon gave them all a forehead slap. This thing is really difficult to operate in practice. Takashi watched Reina crash into a tree branch. His abdomen and the branch had a close contact and the whole person was pulled in an arc. As the inertia of the forward sprint passed, he fell. Fortunately, Reina was quick to hold onto a branch, avoiding falling straight to the ground. Then Reina knelt on the ground and vomited, almost spitting up the previous night's food, and Berthold rushed to help him. help me, I can't get down. One girl's ejector extension cord became entangled in a branch and she hung from the tree, swinging without trying to get out of the branch due to fear of falling. Ah, help! Armin looked terrified and hit his head against the trunk of a large tree. He fell to the ground stunned and couldn't get up for a long time. Since Eren and Mikasa were not in this class, Takashi had to go over and help him up. Originally, Takashi felt that with his current physical condition and his chakra, it shouldn't be difficult for him to use the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. But it was just arrogant, not to say petty. His thoughts were nothing more than just inaccurate. Takashi's attempts only resulted in a much more painful fall than Reiner's. It was only because he was quick enough to avoid impact that he was unable to receive any serious injury. The action in three-dimensional space is far from being on the ground. Even the talented Reiner, Bertholdt and Annie, who were very talented in the practical classes, were a bit uncomfortable. Shit! Takashi scolded himself and got up from the ground. This three-dimensional stunt rig with lots of buttons and wires was much more difficult to handle than he imagined. Again he had fallen into the mud due to his hook not catching on a tree. Fortunately, all the blows were to his body and he quickly adapted. After 30 minutes of falling, he slowly moved with the equipment. Takashi, please help me. Because the retractable rope and a bunch of branches were entangled on his body, Mina, a beautiful girl with 2 black pigtails, was hanging from a tree, interrupting Takashi's dreamy thoughts. Takashi looked at Mina, who was swinging in the tree, and smiled unceremoniously. Call me Captain, I won't help you otherwise. Mina snorted and looked at Takashi angrily. If you don't help, I'll never speak to you again. Words are not what people live on, I guess I need help too. Takashi said in a disinterested voice. Captain. Takashi, can you offer me your help? Carolina Mina huffed a forced smile. Of course, what captain wouldn't help his subordinates? Takashi approached Mina to help her, with words of comfort so that she wouldn't worry. Takashi took a lot of effort in rescuing Mina from the tree. The morning practice was full of difficult situations. The training soldiers hit the trees trying to do various tricks. There are also some hapless people hanging from the tree and did not get help until an instructor came over. Keith looked at all the soldiers and asked, "How are you guys feeling?" "Ha, I was also as excited at first as you guys, then I had to stay in the infirmary for over 3 days after getting hit in the head," said one instructor with a bright smile. "It's fun to have lunch at noon. There's moaning everywhere and basically everyone understands each other's pain. Hey, apply the cream lightly." Takashi looked at Sasha, who had a bread in her mouth as she helped him apply cream to her injured muscles. Ha, Takashi, didn't you turn out to be the most injured of your group?" Sasha asked while stealing the bread from Takashi's food. "Don't talk nonsense, Reiner was the one who ate the most trees," Takashi said without showing shame. "Look, Armin, my beautiful face is swollen," Eren said in a dramatic voice. Takashi took a look and found that Eren's forehead was red and he had 2 cotton balls stuffed in his nose. Obviously, the blow was not light and there was some dust and twigs still in his hair. Armin had a bandage wrapped around his head and Connie had a large bag over his bald head. As for Takashi's top bunk, Thomas, he was not in the mess hall due to lying in the infirmary. His wounds will take at least 3 days to heal. Eren had 2 cotton balls stuffed up his nose and said, "No wonder we weren't allowed to practice directly at first. Turns out it's so hard." These words expressed the feelings of many people. When the instructors demonstrated the practical use beforehand, they thought it was quite simple and that there was no need to have practiced with the equipment for a whole week. As a result, many people were injured. "Are you sure you don't need to go to the infirmary?" Sasha pulled Takashi's shirt down and asked. "No need, eat your food." Takashi refused and began to eat the food until he noticed that a mouse had taken the food from his plate. Sasha averted her gaze without saying anything, as if she had not been aware of Takashi's gaze. After lunch, Takashi, Eren and Amin went to the infirmary to visit the unfortunate Thomas. "Doctor, is my leg really broken? Please help me, I don't want to become disabled." A shout was heard from a certain medical room. "Will it take 2 months for my hands to be fine? Can you hurry? By then I'll be eliminated." "I'm sorry, your fracture is very serious, there's nothing you can do about it." The three were silent when they heard these voices on the road. "The training to become soldiers is much more difficult than I thought," Eren said excitedly, not as arrogant as usual. "I heard someone fell and died this morning." Thomas whispered with a complicated look. Eren said nothing. "This is not a game at all. The training corps has some places of death and the possibility of disability in each of its phases. This is not a place for vacation, this is a place to be real soldiers." Thomas was lucky this time, he still has a sprained foot, which will heal in a few days without delaying future training. The sun rises and sets in 24 hours. On the first day of practice with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment, it turned out that 2 people unfortunately fell and died, 7 people were disabled and taken back to their homes, lost their qualifications as training soldiers, and about 20 people were seriously injured, remaining in the infirmary. The longest recovery time for one of the wounded is 1 month. They cannot recover immediately, and once they are ready, their thoughts and decisions on whether to stay in the corps or leave will be evaluated. Chapter 13, Takashi's Speed. 4 long months have passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone had bled, suffered and trained hard to fulfill their goals in the Army Corps. Shush. Whoosh. In the large trees, one by one, completely ignoring gravity, they soared into the sky, sped past and quickly crossed the forest path along with the wind. "Wow, cool. Ha ha, if they are that slow they will never be able to catch up to my speed. Can anyone go any higher?" A group of young men chased Takashi as the first target in this training, using the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment quite skillfully. They traveled long distances, as light as a swallow, running towards the end point in front of the forest like an arrow. Ahead, a young man with short black hair can be seen taking the lead. His vigorous figure is amazing, like a dragon running through the forest, dodging the branches and obstacles placed one by one like an eagle returning to its nest. As fast as a sharp arrow, one could move at inhuman speeds. "Damn it, it's too fast, I can't catch up at all." Jean could only let his eyes glance at Takashi's disappearing figure with some indisposition. "Come on, now is not the time to be worried," Eren recalled with a serious expression. "Don't think you're a genius, of course I know." Jean's hostility towards Eren was very obvious in the sense of rivalry. "Ha ha, you two are always fighting when you meet." Connie smiled. "Stop joking around, it would be a shame if you were all left too far behind in this test," Reina urged like a big brother. "Don't worry Reina, Mikasa, Annie, Marco and Bertholdt are in the other group. First place in this group is always won by Takashi anyway, we rarely beat him, but we're still firmly in the top 10 of everyone," Connie said with a determined look. Eren gritted his teeth and said while avoiding the branches, "Don't be careless, Yama and Krista are already catching up to us." It would be a shame for two girls to beat us. Eren, we're going to catch up with them this time. Krista's sweet female voice came from behind. Then came a slightly wicked voice, Eren, do you despise women? You have to be thankful Mikasa isn't in this group. Arrogant men, I want to see what you're made of. Ah, just wait and see. Sasha caught up to and eventually overtook him. Eren showed a complicated look. It was only a matter of opening his mouth for them to overtake him several times without being able to do anything. That's right, we'll overtake them today. A little later, said energetically Mina, who passed at high speed. Reina walked up to Eren and pointed, Eren, you stabbed the wrong wasp nest this time. Eren didn't know what to say. Where did they all come from? Hurry up, get rid of them and don't just think about catching up to Takashi. Eren grew impatient. Hurry. Don't delay. This group of more than 100 people was very lively, and competition was also fierce on another parallel forest road less than 40 meters away. With shoulder-length black hair and a beautiful, delicate face, Mikasa dominates the scene. Her smooth, dove-like figure leaps over obstacles and gallops forward with great speed. Followed by Annie with an indifferent face, the wind blew and shook her golden hair. Annie's movements were neat and tidy, manipulating the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to efficiently avoid all kinds of obstacles, and the speed was only a few meters behind Mikasa. She was followed closely by three guys at high speed. Thomas said, I was overtaken by two girls, I have to find a way to catch up with them or Takashi will tease me to death. With a smile on his face, Markobot didn't look too anxious. Don't worry, most of the great soldiers in today's training corps are in the other group, we're in the top 5 of this group so it's okay. Let's just focus on following Annie and not get sidetracked. Berthold Hoover looked at Annie's figure with a slightly haunted look in his eyes. It was known that he, Annie and Reina came from the same place, participating together in the training corps just like Mikasa, Eren and Armin. He has always liked Annie, but he is more introverted and doesn't have the courage to confess his feelings, not daring to show it at all. In fact, the more observant boys know that he likes Annie. After all, Berthold always sneaks glances at Annie. Of course Annie knew, but she didn't have much of a relationship with Berthold Hoover. If you insist on mentioning relationships, Annie thinks Takashi is more interesting. However, those small observations aside, the competence in this group is also quite interesting. Back to Takashi's group, he is flexibly operating the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment to move through the forest nimbly and at high speed. The scenery on both sides recedes rapidly, the whistling of the wind echoes in his ears and with a watchful gaze he scans the trees carefully. At this moment, the feeling of freedom has never been so clear since he came to this world, and with an inexplicable heartbeat that arises spontaneously in his soul he moves forward without worries. At this moment, Takashi suddenly understands Eren's longing for freedom, not just the same goal of killing all the Titans. The world is so vast, how can we hide behind walls? We should go out and see this cruel and beautiful world, all it has to offer. Takashi with a sharp look, he had opened his Mangekyo Sharingan and the vision was much better. He discovered this a few months ago but only thought it was his perspective. Then he discovered that yes, there was an improvement in vision at high speeds. In order to have his Mangekyo active, Takashi always made sure that there was no one around him. After all, it would be unfortunate if someone asked him about the drastic change in the appearance of his eyes. Traveling at a speed that very few could reach, Takashi muttered a motto under his breath: if you expose yourself to the greatest of your fears and manage not to let it control you, then you can tell the heavens that you have attained your freedom. The next second, Takashi shook his head immediately. He was just being a bit impulsive at the moment. Otherwise, why is he thought of as a stereotypical protagonist? He can't expose all his desires, he must keep a firm profile on leadership. Leadership. Whoosh. Takashi, traveling with speed, flew out of the forest using the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment, and the telescopic rope in the air quickly retracted into the ejector. Takashi, who was low in the air, connected the chakra on the soles of his feet, and landed softly on the ground from a height of 4 meters with ease. Ordinary people don't dare to play like that. It's not just jumping. There is also a big impact. If you don't know how to land, the impact would break anyone's feet. Takashi, who possessed chakra and who now manipulated it more easily, could do this without any problems. What about a broken bone? This is a fear that Takashi overcame long ago. Instructor Keith, who was standing at the end, looked at the pocket watch in his hand and nodded to Takashi. Instructor Keith was very impressed by the way Takashi landed a moment ago. For an instant he thought he had broken a bone due to his recklessness. From all these months of training, he knew that Takashi's physical quality was very different from ordinary people. He could be sure that even if Takashi had no Titan fighting skills, he could become a good enough soldier in his role of strength, agility and speed. After a while, Mikasa flew out of the other forest path. After Mikasa stopped, she looked a little surprised at Takashi. "You're much faster than usual today, Takashi." Takashi rolled his eyes. "Beauty, don't you know it's impolite to praise a man? Watch out, I might fall in love." Takashi spread his hands and said, "Nothing special, I'm just in good shape today." Mikasa and Takashi haven't had many clashes in the last 4 months. It is good that they are in different groups. Once both of them are in the same group, they must have a powerful competition to determine who is better. Don't underestimate Mikasa and Takashi's competitive spirit. In actuality, the two sides had defeats and victories in their competition, leaving the strengths and weaknesses indistinguishable between the two. Of course, Takashi always used his chakra at all times, yet it was useless to make a significant breakthrough against Mikasa Ackerman. Mastery over chakra cannot make him an invincible demon. These kinds of tests after all are mainly based on the mobility of the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. Other than being able to eliminate the impact force when touching the ground, there were no other noticeable effects at the moment. If the test is about cutting power, the chakra is still somewhat useful. It should be easier to cut the back of the Titan's neck and be able to protect the blade from wear to some extent. Takashi can feel that Mikasa is similar in physical quality to him, and is now almost twice as much as ordinary people in general. Perhaps with continued use of chakra, also considering Captain Levi, he could be stronger in the future. Mikasa's hidden power was awakened at approximately 9 years of age. The Takashi of the past had that boost of strength at the age of 12 years of noticeable difference. At first Takashi thought that some of his strength had somehow been erased from his body, but then by using chakra everything was greatly improved and now he surpassed Mikasa, making use of his great abilities. Therefore, he has to intensify his training and strive to continue to surpass those two people in the future. Chakra's training method keeps improving him and he is sure that at some point he will be able to make use of it in the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. Not long after Takashi and Mikasa reached the finish line, Annie, Reina, Eren, Jean, Connie, Sasha, Yama and Krista arrived one after another. Another group also arrived following close behind Annie, Berthold, Marco and Thomas. Okay, everyone performed well today. Instructor Keith was a little relieved. 4 months later, these little brats are finally somewhat decent under his expectations. After everyone else arrived, Instructor Keith announced loudly, "Today's test results are as follows. The top 5 in Group A are Takashi Ackerman, Raina Braun, Erin Yaja, Jean Kirstein, and Connie Springer. The top 5 in Group B are Mikasa Ackerman, Annie Leohard, Bertold Hoover, Marco Bott, Thomas Wagner. The grouping is random every day. Sasha, Yuma and the others are in Takashi's group today, and just because there are too many strong people they didn't make it into the top 10 this time. However, this usual lineup does not count for the overall score." As usual, there was a burst of applause, and after the applause stopped, Instructor Keith said with a serious face, "Okay, there is something I want to tell you. The next course changes. The 3-dimensional maneuver team training will be held in the afternoon and the daily test will start directly after the training. In the morning the physical training will be reinforced. It is no longer an ordinary lap race, but a long-distance race in the forest. No matter what the weather is like, you have to run, even if it rains, you have to run alone with a raincoat. This is in preparation for the year-end trial that will take place in 2 months. Everyone must take it seriously. Now there are only 267 corporals of the 104th generation. I will not be pleased if they graduate if they are not at least 200 soldiers. Ah. Excuse me. Does it mean that after physical training in the morning, I have to practice with the 3-dimensional maneuver team in the afternoon? I have to run when it's raining, my God, it's so cruel. I'm going to catch a cold." The crowd shouted for a while. Some people were getting more and more eager to train like Erin, some were pale like Armin, some were indifferent like Annie, some were full of energy like Takashi, some were bitter and hated themselves for being weak. And so on and so forth. Youth is like that. Youth is full of enthusiasm and at the same time it is easy to get confused and depressed. Especially for this group of young soldiers in training, they have to suffer more, and only they know the various tastes of doing that. Time passes slowly in a restless state, the future comes faster and faster, and Takashi still thinks that he is not strong enough. Chapter 14, A Hectic Race. Takashi must say that the instructor Keith is doing things with energy and determination. Tomorrow, according to his words, there would be an important test that would have a very high valuation in the qualifications of each of the cadets. In a few days, the garrison regiment sent a type of backpack ideal for carrying a lot of weight. When the heavy backpacks were delivered, Takashi picked up the backpack that weighed about 10 kilograms, twice as much as the 3-dimensional maneuvering equipment. During the test, there were supposed to be no mistakes due to all the training he has been doing in the past 5 months, considering that at least that physical ability was needed to fight titans in the future. This is only a test for the first year, so it was only something small. In the second year of physical training, the same course will have to be done, but now with the 3-dimensional maneuvering equipment plus the heavy backpack. Running and marching in the forest regardless of the weather conditions was just a simulation of what awaited him outside the walls. The day the run was to be done had arrived. Instructor Keith stood in front of all the cadets and said, "Okay, the weather is very calm this morning, you are lucky. Remember, what you are doing is the least you will be able to accomplish in the future. You have all been trained to be able to pass this training with ease. This is just a walk in the woods, it takes less than 3 kilometers to get to the finish line. No one can be slower than my walking speed. Don't worry, I'll be sure to jog at a small speed." Keith said with a mischievous grin. "God, no way. He'll kill us like this. It's heavy, heavier than a three-dimensional maneuvering team. What's different this time is that a three-dimensional maneuvering team moves with compressed gas and using a backpack can only support the weight. Everyone was grumbling silently for a while. Armin carried his backpack and his face turned pale. His physical improvement had not been very good. In the past, he felt a bit tired when he used the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. So now he was panicking. Aaron, who looked at Armin's uneasiness, said, "Armin, take it easy, it's only 3 kilometers, which is not too far. Everything will be fine." Mikasa easily put the backpack on his shoulders and comforted Armin. "Well, I'll persevere." Armin nodded with a firm expression. On the other side, Takeshi was standing next to Sasha as he did some basic stretches to warm up the body. "It's a bit heavy, but I take solace in the food we'll have after this long run." Eyes sparkling, Sasha pictured a delicious steaming loaf of bread. "All you can think about is eating. When we graduate, I'll prepare some very special meals for you," Takeshi said with a comforting smile. "Very well." Sasha nodded her head, but then she remembered something and said, "But Takeshi, you don't know how to cook." Takeshi's comforting smile was abruptly erased. He looked at Sasha out of the corner of his eye with slight annoyance. After everyone finished warming up, Instructor Keith gave an order and the training soldiers tried to match the pace behind the instructor. Keith wasn't walking at all. They could only catch up after a few minutes, but then realized that some were not qualified to keep up. Of course, there was no reward for the first finishers, but there were surprises for the last 10. As for the surprises, the bald instructor said that it was not something convenient to reveal for now. Takeshi kept his breathing pace steady. He ran in the middle of the long line without any concern on his face. Running long distances requires endurance, and one must also breathe correctly so as not to tire easily. To master the method of breathing during a long run, one needs to practice well during medium to long distance runs, an important part of which is learning to use the mouth and nose at the same time throughout the run. Although breathing through the nose is beneficial to ensure the temperature and cleanliness of the air, in the case of deep and urgent breathing, breathing through the nose alone cannot meet the needs of the human body. At this time, it is necessary to use the mouth to assist breathing, but the mouth should not be opened too wide, it can be ajar, and the tip of the tongue should be close to the upper palate to prevent the pharynx from moving and the mouth from drying out too quickly. Also, this type of long-distance, weight-bearing running is a test of willpower. Most people give up easily at the halfway point. 3 kilometers is not strictly a long-distance race, but considering the weight behind each cadet's back, it won't be easy at all. Aaron and Jean are really motivated in this race, Thomas said with a smile in the middle of the line. Takeshi, who was next to him, followed Thomas' line of sight, and in front, Aaron and Jean was apparently competing. Mikasa silently followed Aaron. At this point, Instructor Keith had already overtaken many cadets who fell far behind his speed pace. Takeshi looked back. Instructor Keith was on his way, not far behind him and Thomas. At this speed, Keith would definitely overtake him. Takeshi suddenly smiled. "It's time to show my real speed, Thomas. Do you want to keep up with me?" Thomas shook his head. "No, I want to finish this training without injury." Takeshi smiled and didn't speak. He stopped jogging at a medium speed and suddenly accelerated. He started running straight. He accelerated to get rid of his good friend Thomas. This time he didn't run beside Thomas, and there was nothing special, just that he didn't want to be badly graded within Instructor Keith's gaze. Soon after, Instructor Keith trotted over and past Thomas, who was trying to struggle his speed again, with a blank face. "Oh no, slow down. Thomas watched as Keith trotted past him, trying to catch up, but his legs would not obey him. Instructor Keith ignored the shouts of the soldiers. After all, he had started from behind to follow a medium-high run time. Ahead, dust and gravel flew all over the path. Takashi overtook Yuma and said, "Do you need me to carry you, princess?" Yuma rolled her eyes and spat to the side. Her saliva almost hit Takashi's face and said, "Sorry, I didn't look at you." "This bitch." Takashi thought to himself and then shot a friendly glance at Krista before disappearing. Yuma, indeed she can run faster, but she has to take care of the goddess Krista. Takashi felt that these two women were eggs from the same basket, but this is his freedom. What he is looking for in this world is freedom, so he supports them. Takashi then moved on to Marco, Connie and Sasha. Connie looked at Takashi's back with a puzzled expression. Why does Takashi always start last and end up among the first? Is it about arrogance or just to humiliate us? Connie knew that as far as handling three-dimensional maneuvering equipment was concerned, Takashi was better than him and many others. However, he thought that at least Takashi's physical condition was at the same level as his or even a little worse. "Come on, Connie, the goal awaits us," Takashi shouted in the distance. "Damn Takashi." Connie closed her eyes and shouted Takashi's name with a slight grudge in her heart. With the heavy backpack on his back, Takashi was fast and steady, gradually passing Reina and Berthold. Takashi felt that Reina and Berthold were not doing their best. However, as they all saved a little more than he could accomplish, he ignored that fact and kept running. Takashi doesn't even know who the titans are that threaten his life, let alone their intentions in attacking humanity like that. He was not familiar with Reina and Berthold, but Eren has a good relationship with those two to the point of being comrades. Therefore, Takashi would seriously consider them for the future. At this point, Takashi had caught up with Eren and Jean, who were in front, and Mikasa was watching him from behind Eren. Eren and Jean are in some kind of competition. In fact, these two people were competing over any trivial matter that was put in front of them. Then the two began to exhale loudly. At first, Marco and Thomas blocked the confrontations of these two, but then they got used to it and considered it as a competition between rivalries. The incredible thing is that no matter how much they argued, they never came into physical contact. After a few days, I can still communicate normally. Can they still hold on? Takashi asked Jean and Eren beside him as he looked at them panting. Looking at Takashi's calm appearance, he said with some difficulty, "Of course, don't underestimate us." Eren's face was flushed and his face was sweating profusely. He was supported by an unbreakable willpower and did not speak for a while as he continued running. Takashi didn't respond for a moment. He looked back and Instructor Keith was shouting at some slowly running cadets. Takashi smiled. "We don't have to race like that. Instructor Keith is only interested in the last 10 people and the punishment he will give them. So, we just have to run a little faster than the others. I don't care about places, I'm worried about Armin," Eren said, panting. Takashi shook his head. "Don't worry, the punishment is a surprise, Armin can handle that and much more." Jean snorted, "I hope so." Eren looked at Takashi and nodded. He knew Armin better than anyone and knew he wouldn't give up so easily. A few minutes later Takashi, Eren and the others arrived at the finish line. Takashi took off his backpack and moved his joints. He also needed to slow down after running. It's better not to sit straight down or it can cause problems. Mikasa wiped the sweat from Eren's face with a handkerchief. Takashi pouted and looked at Sasa in the distance. asking about food. No, impossible. At this moment, the others also arrived at the finish line one after another. In the end, there were only a dozen people running in front of Instructor Keith. From Instructor Keith's ugly face, you could tell that he was in a bad mood. Someone's going to have bad luck. Everyone was heartbroken. After a period of time, the 10 slowest people also came to the end one after another, including Amin. Instructor Keith approached Amin, who was sweating profusely. With his hands he lifted Amin by the head. Burst. Get up this instant, I pity you. Instructor Keith shouted. Those who ran fast were not rewarded, those who ran slow were pleasantly surprised, and then the other 9 boys who came in last were punished harshly, again holding the suitcase between their backs. Chapter 15, The Snow is Cold. After punishing the 10 unlucky cadets who came in last in the race, Instructor Keith approached the crowd and began to spit sermons. This time is just the beginning of your training. To be honest, their performance today was terrible. An old man working in the field can run faster than all of you. Within this training corps, only 23 soldiers are qualified. Therefore, next I will have to train you rigorously. I hope that in the Snow Mountain test to be held in 3 months, you will not have an embarrassing result. For if you get lost in the snow or can no longer continue, your death is certain. So here comes the surprise. Since you are all in a very good mood, rest for half an hour and run back if you don't want to miss the food. Instructor Keith finally said with a cold smile. My goodness, we still have to run back. It's only a half-hour break, this is. I feel like I'm going to die. It's okay, it's just a run back. Not everyone knows how to complain, anyway, today they are destined to suffer. Many heard Takashi's exclamation, this sure is a good surprise, ready to start. However, Takashi's face twitched. Not long ago he thought this surprise was only for the last 10 places, he never thought they would include them all in the same package. This was a direct punch in everyone's face. Many of the cadets who made sure not to be in the last 10 showed a sad expression. How am I supposed to go back to camp if we spent all our strength not to be in the last 10? Takashi rubbed his legs and right now he was very bitter, not to mention that he has the power to use a Susanoo in this world, even if he has chakra and can make use of that power in his body, he can't let this kind of surprises come without him being aware. Today is just the training, tomorrow it could be an enemy attack. After half an hour, everyone went back to running and it didn't take long for everyone to have a sudden death expression on their faces. Half an hour of rest was not enough to regain the stamina in their legs, much less regain their breath that after 2 minutes they had completely lost control of their breathing. Takashi could not believe it. More than 4 months had passed in the training corps. His strength in both chakra and general capabilities had strengthened to a very acceptable level. Along with his own extraordinary potential, though not comparable to the best talent in this world, his strength and physical endurance were something very few had. However, he had now begun to tire and felt the burn run through his legs. Of course, even if he was starting to feel exhausted, he was still holding his own among the frontrunners next to Miyakasa. He couldn't stop pushing himself. Wow! Ouch! After the race finally ended, Takashi wiped the sweat from his forehead and discovered that many people were lying on the grass like corpses. The first day of weight walking was an extremely bad experience for everyone. Eren looked at Amin who lay on the ground and had long ago rolled his eyes, almost foaming at the mouth, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the experience. Thomas sat on the floor, thumping his legs hard, causing Markobot to check if his legs were still connected to his body, and Connie on her side was doubtful for life. Instructor Keith looked at the people lying on the ground and smiled unscrupulously. What's the matter, can't they stand this little walk? Aren't they usually the first ones to run too fast? Tomorrow training of this nature will begin. Remember, practice with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment is still every day. Anyone who feels qualified can come to my office and request the equipment. Ignoring the surly crowd, Instructor Keith turned and left. Time passed quietly. 2 months of time slipped away between training and more practice. The winter season had arrived when the snow fell from the sky. On this day, when Takashi stepped out of the bedroom door, he saw the ground covered in snow, with heavy snow falling from the sky, dyeing the world a vast expanse of white. Is the snow season here? Takashi, as a person of this world, was the first time he had ever looked at snow. He felt an indescribable feeling from his previous world, so now he was very happy. Thomas, who was standing next to him, was wrapped in a thick grayish-white military uniform, smiled at Takashi and said, "It's strange, you got up a little late today." Takashi didn't mind. It's rare to rest today, and it's normal for me to sleep late. In fact, it was a little cold and it was hard to get up as early as he always did. The training corps also have some vacation days, and Takashi found out that after the Big Snow Mountain test there would be some weeks off that will be granted time after finishing the test. Takashi hummed a tune and went to the dining hall for breakfast, and then hung out at the training camp with his roommate Thomas. Many children played in the snow at the training camp, and some people hung out like Takashi and Thomas. Takashi saw Eren, Mikasa and Armin building a snowman. It must be said that the trio had a good relationship. Jean Kirstein acted like a calm and beautiful man on the side, trying to attract Mikasa's attention. In all honesty, Jean is tall and handsome, looks in line and has excellent training results. However, in Mikasa's eyes there is only one Eren in her life. Takashi and Thomas walked to a corner of the training ground. He found Mina and Annie under a leafless maple tree. The blonde girl was standing under the tree in a daze. Mina was making a snowman, and when she looked at Takashi she greeted them politely. Takashi bent down, grabbed a handful of snow and made a ball which he then threw hard. The snowball he threw and smashed it on Mina's back. Mina, who was hit by a snowball, stood up and turned her head, looked at Takashi, bent down and grabbed a handful of snow, balled it up and threw it at Takashi. Takashi pulled Thomas to his side to block it. Stat! The snowball hit Thomas directly in the head. Then, Takashi turned and ran. Thomas was stunned at first, then came to and frantically chased after Takashi. As he ran, he shouted, "Stop! Takashi, I have to hit you too." In Thomas' psychological mindset he thought that Takashi could flirt with a girl in front of him, but he couldn't use him as a shield whenever he pleased. Mina stroked her forehead with her hand, her expression a bit helpless, obviously speechless in the face of these two. Annie, the cool beauty on the side, asked, "Mina, do you have a good relationship with Takashi?" "I think Takashi is very interesting." Annie showed a rare smile, bent down and built a snowman with Mina. "Okay, Takashi always seems carefree coming to this place. However, I can tell that he hides much more than he expresses, while his simple actions always leave Eren and Jean surprised." Thinking of something, Mina smiled. Last time she accidentally tricked Eren. In other words, the result was that Mikasa's eyes were scary at the time. Annie looked at Mina and asked matter-of-factly, "Do you like Eren?" "No, I just think Eren is brave, although he's not as good as Takashi, who cares about everyone's growth. He works very hard, just like Mikasa. Sasha said Mikasa insists on practicing boxing every night, which is kind of intense. Mina showed a wry smile. Not to mention that Annie and Mina were having a good time chatting on one side. On the other side, Thomas still couldn't catch up with Takashi, but Takashi took the initiative to stop and said that he would make peace with Thomas on this beautiful day. However, Thomas disagreed and threw a 9-ball which hit my axe's face. The result was not very pleasant. During the days off, corporals can also learn to cook on their own in the kitchen, as long as they organize the cooking utensils afterwards. Takashi, who had bragged about his cooking skills to Sasha, prepared a delicious meal recalling some recipes from his previous life. As Takashi chatted with Thomas for a while, around noon, he walked to the kitchen and Thomas followed him with anticipation. Thomas knew Takashi's culinary skills better than anyone else. Takashi walked to the entrance of the dining room and discovered that Krista and Yama were having a snowball fight off to the side. He couldn't help but think about the last time he cheated on Eren. 10 days ago, Takashi and Eren were chatting in the wooden hallway at the entrance of the cafeteria after lunch. Krista, Yama and Mina were chatting in the open space on the right side of the comda. Due to the standing problem, Takashi and Eren couldn't see the three of them because of the blind spot. Takashi asked aloud, "Eren, who do you think is the most beautiful, Mikasa, Annie, Krista or Mina?" Eren, who was a bit overwhelmed by the sudden question, replied, "That. I think it's almost the same thing. Why are you suddenly asking me this?" Looking at the old cat, Takashi still didn't give up. "So, who do you think is the cutest?" Eren blushed. Maybe no one had ever asked him that question before. That, Krista. Krista aside blushed immediately. Yama looked at Eren and Takashi with an unhappy expression. Mina smiled and said nothing. Later, for some unknown reason, this matter spread quickly everywhere and eventually all the soldiers in the training corps knew about it, and there was a lot of talk about it, both boys and girls. Here's what the boys had to say: "Jean, Mikasa is the prettiest." No rebuttals accepted. Reina, Krista, no explanation. Takashi, "It doesn't really matter, I'm the prettiest anyway. However, Sasha always steals my buns." Berthold, Annie. Thomas, Mina. Eren, "I just told the truth." "Why are you looking at me like that, Mikasa?" Connie, "They're all pretty girls." Marco, "It's really hard to tell the difference, I support Connie." Takashi was originally just curious about protagonist Eren's tastes, but he didn't expect this to spread through everyone's mouths. Anyway, Mikasa's expression was terrifying when she found out about this, especially after hearing Eren say that Krista is the cutest. Anyway, Takashi could only look at Mikasa for 2 seconds before being defeated and slipping away. After that, Mikasa didn't really like the conversation topics Takashi brought up. Chapter 16, Mountain Test. How complicated it is to understand women's minds. Well, that doesn't go with Sasha. Takashi muttered as he thought about all he had gone through for a simple topic of conversation. Lost in thought, Takashi didn't move until Thomas spoke to him. After frying up a plate of grated potatoes, rice and a plate of scrambled eggs with some spices he found in the kitchen, in the dining room, Takashi and Thomas waited until the food wasn't too hot to eat it. Takashi knew how amazing he had cooked today. Not all meals in the training corps have rice paddies, many times it's bread and oatmeal soup. Takashi looked at Eren and the others who had come for lunch and motioned for them to come over and taste the food he prepared. "Takashi, I heard you had cooked together with some more classmates earlier. What did you prepare for me?" Sasha rushed into the dining room with an intense look on her face. Well, this meal I had never prepared before since I didn't have the proper materials. Now I can say that it came out pretty much the same as the idea in my imagination. Takashi held a plate up for Sasha to taste. Mikasa, Eren and Armin watched this scene with an amused smile. The person I least thought of cooking food was you, Takashi, very strange. Eren and the others were intrigued to eat the dishes Takashi had made. Humph. Thomas snorted sadly and looked at Takashi as he passed out the dishes that should have originally been his. At the sight of the food, Eren and Armin were speechless. What was this called? Eren had only heard that a while ago Takashi had prepared some food, but it wasn't as flashy as it was now. Mikasa's voice was cold and sweet. It's good to talk about food, just food. Takashi smiled as he shrugged, taking Mikasa's words as an uncomfortable hiss in his ears. While Eren had even been glad of the incident provoked by Takashi's questions, it wasn't the same for him who bore Mikasa's cold stare. I think it would be better to talk about how to cross the snow mountain. Sharing information is useful to help each other. Takashi changed the subject. Armin has already planned it. Do you want to join us? Eren asked. Takashi smiled and said, I made a team with Jean, Thomas and Marco. Everything will be fine. If the weather is normal, there shouldn't be any accidents. Armin analyzed with a thoughtful expression. Could it be true that no accidents would happen in this test? Takashi suddenly felt bad. He didn't know much about the future. Takashi only remembered the first animated part of this world, and would very possibly never remember what would happen next. Even in this test he had no recollection of seeing it develop, so he could only take the test and take care of himself. Just after lunch at noon, Instructor Keith told everyone to gather in the general courtyard. A group of soldiers from the training corps lined up in a neat square in the general yard. This time no one had any intention of talking. It has been a while and these teenagers already seemed to be fully accustomed to the military. Instructor Keith wore a grey-green military uniform and a cap and stood in front of everyone. With his hands behind his back, he walked a few more steps into the crowd and said, "All right, you little bastards, you're finally behaving a little decently. Today I'll talk about the Snow Mountain test." Instructor Keith moistened his throat and shouted, "The time has been decided. The day after tomorrow the mountain test will begin. The total distance of the test is almost 25 kilometers, including 20 kilometers on flat terrain and 5 kilometers on the snowy mountain. It will start early in the morning, and the earlier you arrive, the higher the score you will get on your record. Remember, the results of this test are very important and will be included in the final evaluation. Tomorrow you will have a full day to prepare your equipment and materials. Winter clothing has been distributed and oil lamps can be picked up at the warehouse. Remember, don't deviate from the route and do what you can to arrive on time before dark. If you think you can't make it, I recommend that you give up this test. If you fall or get carelessly lost in a place like that, it may be too late when the instructors come to your aid." Takashi knew that a test in the snow is no joke, let alone to be irresponsible. As it gets darker, the weather gets colder and the proportion of physical wear and tear increases. Going over the hill in the snow, they have to make it to a camp at the foot of the mountain. However, all this remains a major challenge. Remember, you can form teams of no more than 5 members, you can move quickly and steadily that way. Keith pointed out with a discerning look. After Instructor Keith finished speaking, he pointed to a young instructor with a book in his hands and said, "Now, if you wish to participate and believe you have the skills, you can go to my office to sign up today. Spread out." Keith took the book immediately, and those who wanted to participate followed him naturally. Takahashi did not hesitate, along with Aaron and Connie followed him directly. Although he had no intention of participating in the exams, he knew it was a good training experience. However, there are also people who hesitate to participate or stay where they are. Not many are ready to participate. After all, the only people who can join the military police corps are the top 10 in the final score, which considering their capabilities is impossible. A young and somewhat small training corps soldier seemed to struggle, stood there for a long time and finally walked into Instructor Keith's office. Some people are unremarkable. Liam and Daniel are two clear examples. They underperform in training, and this time it was not about willpower to finish the test. However, the two of them were determined that with hard work they could finish in the top 10 and be able to join the military police, wanting to prove themselves in this very important test. However, neither Liam nor Daniel realized that they did not have the fitness and ability to pass the Snow Mountain test. Their lack of willpower and determination would be what would cause them the most trouble going up the mountain. Do you think we could participate in the same group? It's me, Liam, and my friend Daniel. Liam said as he looked at Takahashi. Sorry, but I already have a group, good luck. Takahashi said as he refused to go along with those two young men. I understand, thanks anyway. Liam nodded and left. Takahashi watched the young man leave with a disappointed look. He himself knew that this test would be difficult, so he thought that they would give up on the test if he didn't decide to go with them. In the evening, Instructor Keith looked at the list in his hand. The total number of people was 257 and the number of applicants was 121, which was more than he thought. At first he thought there would not be even half of them in this test. He looked closer and found some guys that made him frown. He didn't know the level of all the soldiers, but he still knew which ones were excellent and which ones were the worst. Forget it, people should be responsible for their own choices. If this test doesn't kill them, they will learn what it's like to make a choice when facing a titan. Instructor Keith said to himself. He has no right to make decisions for others. He can only wish them good luck and give them some advice that will serve them well in the future. The next day, Takahashi, Marco, Jean and Thomas prepared dry food, water bags, glass oil lamps and other equipment. No one dared to say that they would be able to reach the camp at the foot of the distant hill before nightfall. After all, in the present weather it would be getting dark before evening. Now the snow is more than 10 centimeters thick, and 25 kilometers is nowhere near, including 5 kilometers of mountain roads. This is also the reason why almost 100 people gave up directly long before the start. As soon as the day of the event dawned at 7 a.m., more than 100 people who participated in this event set off. The schedule is based on 7 o'clock in the morning. You can't leave early. Of course, you can also leave later. Nobody cares about that after all. Jean, who was wearing a grayish-white military uniform, complained, "What the hell is Takahashi doing? Aaron and the others have left, why hasn't he come yet?" Thomas looked a little embarrassed. Takahashi had said to move forward first. Let's get going. What the hell, he didn't take it seriously again. Jean was very dissatisfied. Marco said, then let's go first, Takahashi will be fine, we don't have to worry about him at all. HMPH, forget it this time, let's go first. Thomas was a little helpless. In the morning, he asked Takahashi to go out, but Takahashi actually told him not to rush him and let him sleep for a while. When everyone had already left, Takahashi put on a grayish-white cotton quilted jacket and set off with his luggage on his back. Following behind the crowd, Whoever stayed behind would give him a hand, so that no one would have any trouble. He had told himself that he would make a change. He should not fluctuate at his words and take care of everyone as the best soldier of this group. Thus, Takashi slowly departed. As for qualifications, that is not important. He will not join the military police corps. As long as he graduates successfully and is not afraid of death, he can join the Scout Corps. Scout Corps Commander, we welcome recruits who are not afraid of death to join us. At 8 o'clock in the morning, when Takashi departed, he met Instructor Keith, who had not left the starting point of the test route. Of course, Instructor Keith did not need to participate in the mountain test. He had already prepared several other instructors in the camp at the foot of the mountain waiting for the soldiers who would participate. Keith looked calm, as if Takashi, who seemed to be on a trip and sightseeing, passed in front of his house. Won't you be worried about the final evaluation results in a few years? Keith asked casually. Takashi smiled slightly. No sir, for someone like me, it doesn't make much sense to try very hard in the tests and always finish first. Successful graduation from the training corps doesn't require outstanding grades. This is a reality that Eren hasn't seen. To go to the scouting corps, Instructor Keith, who seemed interested in Eren's results, also knew this. Instructor Keith showed a rare smile. Then why do you have to participate in the test? This test is not difficult for you. It's not hard for me, but not necessarily for some people I appreciate. There are always some people who can't recognize their own abilities, and it's up to you to help them in the process. Takashi expressed his thoughts. Oh. Then I'll leave it to you, Keith said and headed back to the base. Takashi shrugged his shoulders in a disinterested manner. Just now, he could notice Keith's worried expression when he mentioned Eren's name. Takashi walked leisurely to the end of all the groups. The first part of the test was fine, it was nothing new. After all, most of the people who came to participate were in good shape. The real test is in getting over that snow hill. Exhaling a puff of white breath, Takashi found that the sky was getting gloomy, the wind was getting stronger and stronger, and snowflakes were floating thicker and thicker in the air. It's snowing again. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the people across the street are climbing the snowy mountain right now. The sky was not clear at all, but you can still see some morning sunshine. But now it is snowing. Maybe someone has some problems. But Takashi didn't know who yet. Takashi is slowly climbing the mountain, and sometimes the path on the mountain can be tricky. If you accidentally slide down some ravine, you will end up severely injured. Therefore, Takashi was very cautious. Although he has a lot of self-confidence, he can get hurt and does not want to make use of his wonderful hidden card. The routes gradually increased. There was more than one path at the foot of the mountain. There were tracks on both paths. Takashi chose one at random and did not insist on increasing speed. When the sky darkened, Takashi lit the glass-covered oil lamp. Finally, Takashi found a soldier sitting on the ground under a steep slope in front of him. Takashi trotted over and discovered that it was a boy. His face was pale. His whole body was shaking, he was bumping his right leg and his expression was a bit painful. Are you okay? Takashi asked. The boy looked at Takashi, a little surprised. Takashi, why are you behind everyone? Tell me what happened to you first. Only until now did he discover that this corporal was Liam, the one who asked him to be part of his team along with a close friend of his. It all went wrong. A rock came loose from the mountain and I fell into a ravine. Daniel possibly fell somewhere else on this mountain as well. Liam was more worried about his friend Daniel than his own safety. At first I wanted to walk, but it's impossible for me to move. Who were the members of your group? Takashi handed him the glass lamp and then took off his backpack as he helped Liam up. Me, Daniel, Krista and Yama. Liam said, wait, this won't work, you better go to camp and let some instructor come get me. One man doesn't leave another behind. It's getting dark, it's possible no instructor can find you until then. Do you want to freeze to death? Takashi put down his backpack and carried Liam at a steady pace forward. But you won't be able to hold on like this, shouted Liam, who was on his back. We are almost at the top of the mountain, and at this point it's not possible to go down the mountain either. Don't worry, I'm stronger than you think. Takashi smiled at being able to save someone in danger. Now, he can only pray that Yama, Chista and Daniel are okay. Okay, put me down if you can't anymore. By the way, thank you very much. Liam couldn't refuse. He felt relief to see someone coming to his aid. Even when he tried to tell Takashi that it was okay if he waited, he was dying of fear inside. It's a relief that Takashi's physical performance is one of the best in the training corps, otherwise Liam would hesitate in his words. Chapter 16, Mountain Test. How complicated it is to understand women's minds. Well, that doesn't go with Sasha. Takashi muttered as he thought about all he had gone through for a simple topic of conversation. Lost in thought, Takashi didn't move until Thomas spoke to him. After frying up a plate of grated potatoes, rice and a plate of scrambled eggs with some spices he found in the kitchen, in the dining room, Takashi and Thomas waited until the food wasn't too hot to eat it. Takashi knew how amazing he had cooked today. Not all meals in the training corps have rice paddies, many times it's bread and oatmeal soup. Takashi looked at Eren and the others who had come for lunch and motioned for them to come over and taste the food he prepared. Takashi, I heard you had cooked together with some more classmates earlier. What did you prepare for me? Sasha rushed into the dining room with an intense look on her face. Well, this meal I had never prepared before since I didn't have the proper materials. Now I can say that it came out pretty much the same as the idea in my imagination. Takashi held a plate up for Sasha to taste. Mikasa, Eren and Armin watched this scene with an amused smile. The person I least thought of cooking food was you, Takashi. Very strange. Eren and the others were intrigued to eat the dishes Takashi had made. Humph. Thomas snorted sadly and looked at Takashi as he passed out the dishes that should have originally been his. At the sight of the food, Eren and Armin were speechless. What was this called? Eren had only heard that a while ago Takashi had prepared some food, but it wasn't as flashy as it was now. Mikasa's voice was cold and sweet. It's good to talk about food, just food. Takashi smiled as he shrugged, taking Mikasa's words as an uncomfortable hiss in his ears. While Eren had even been glad of the incident provoked by Takashi's questions, it wasn't the same for him, who bore Mikasa's cold stare. I think it would be better to talk about how to cross the snow mountain. Sharing information is useful to help each other. Takashi changed the subject. Armin has already planned it. Do you want to join us? Eren asked. Takashi smiled and said, I made a team with Jean, Thomas and Marco. Everything will be fine. If the weather is normal, there shouldn't be any accidents. Armin analyzed with a thoughtful expression. Could it be true that no accidents would happen in this test? Takashi suddenly felt bad. He didn't know much about the future. Takashi only remembered the first animated part of this world, and would very possibly never remember what would happen next. Even in this test he had no recollection of seeing it develop, so he could only take the test and take care of himself. Just after lunch at noon, Instructor Keith told everyone to gather in the general courtyard. A group of soldiers from the training corps lined up in a neat square in the general yard. This time no one had any intention of talking. It has been a while and these teenagers already seemed to be fully accustomed to the military. Instructor Keith wore a grey-green military uniform and a cap and stood in front of everyone. With his hands behind his back, he walked a few more steps into the crowd and said, "All right, you little bastards, you're finally behaving a little decently. Today I'll talk about the Snow Mountain test." Instructor Keith moistened his throat and shouted, "The time has been decided. The day after tomorrow the mountain test will begin. The total distance of the test is almost 25 kilometers, including 20 kilometers on flat terrain and 5 kilometers on the snowy mountain. It will start early in the morning, and the earlier you arrive, the higher the score you will get on your record. Remember, the results of this test are very important and will be included in the final evaluation. Tomorrow you will have a full day to prepare your equipment and materials. Winter clothing has been distributed and oil lamps can be picked up at the warehouse. Remember, don't deviate from the route and do what you can to arrive on time before dark. If you think you can't make it, I recommend that you give up this test. If you fall or get carelessly lost in a place like that, it may be too late when the instructors come to your aid." Takashi knew that a test in the snow is no joke, let alone to be irresponsible. As it gets darker, the weather gets colder and the proportion of physical wear and tear increases. Going over the hill in the snow, they have to make it to a camp at the foot of the mountain. However, all this remains a major challenge. Remember, you can form teams of no more than 5 members, you can move quickly and steadily that way. Keith pointed out with a discerning look. After Instructor Keith finished speaking, he pointed to a young instructor with a book in his hands and said, "Now, if you wish to participate and believe you have the skills, you can go to my office to sign up today. Spread out." Keith took the book immediately, and those who wanted to participate followed him naturally. Takahashi did not hesitate, along with Aaron and Connie followed him directly. Although he had no intention of participating in the exams, he knew it was a good training experience. However, there are also people who hesitate to participate or stay where they are. Not many are ready to participate. After all, the only people who can join the military police corps are the top 10 in the final score, which considering their capabilities is impossible. A young and somewhat small training corps soldier seemed to struggle, stood there for a long time and finally walked into Instructor Keith's office. Some people are unremarkable, Liam and Daniel are 2 clear examples. They underperform in training and this time it was not about willpower to finish the test. However, the 2 of them were determined that with hard work they could finish in the top 10 and be able to join the military police, wanting to prove themselves in this very important test. However, neither Liam nor Daniel realized that they did not have the fitness and ability to pass the Snow Mountain test. Their lack of willpower and determination would be what would cause them the most trouble going up the mountain. "Do you think we could participate in the same group? It's me, Liam, and my friend Daniel," Liam said as he looked at Takashi. "Sorry, but I already have a group, good luck," Takashi said as he refused to go along with those 2 young men. "I understand, thanks anyway." Liam nodded and left. Takashi watched the young man leave with a disappointed look. He himself knew that this test would be difficult, so he thought that they would give up on the test if he didn't decide to go with them. In the evening, Instructor Keith looked at the list in his hand. The total number of people was 257 and the number of applicants was 121, which was more than he thought. At first he thought there would not be even half of them in this test. He looked closer and found some guys that made him frown. He didn't know the level of all the soldiers, but he still knew which ones were excellent and which ones were the worst. Forget it. People should be responsible for their own choices. If this test doesn't kill them, they will learn what it's like to make a choice when facing a titan. Instructor Keith said to himself. He has no right to make decisions for others. He can only wish them good luck and give them some advice that will serve them well in the future. The next day, Takashi, Marco, Jean and Thomas prepared dry food, water bags, glass oil lamps and other equipment. No one dared to say that they would be able to reach the camp at the foot of the distant hill before nightfall. After all, in the present weather it would be getting dark before evening. Now the snow is more than 10 centimeters thick, and 25 kilometers is nowhere near, including 5 kilometers of mountain roads. This is also the reason why almost 100 people gave up directly long before the start. As soon as the day of the event dawned at 7 a.m., more than 100 people who participated in this event set off. The schedule is based on 7 o'clock in the morning. You can't leave early. Of course, you can also leave later. Nobody cares about that after all. Jean, who was wearing a grayish-white military uniform, complained, "What the hell is Takashi doing? Eren and the others have left, why hasn't he come yet?" Thomas looked a little embarrassed. Takashi had said to move forward first, let's get going. What the hell, he didn't take it seriously again. Jean was very dissatisfied. Marco said, then let's go first. Takashi will be fine, we don't have to worry about him at all. HMPH, forget it this time, let's go first. Thomas was a little helpless. In the morning, he asked Takashi to go out, but Takashi actually told him not to rush him and let him sleep for a while. When everyone had already left, Takashi put on a grayish-white cotton quilted jacket and set off with his luggage on his back. Following behind the crowd, whoever stayed behind would give him a hand, so that no one would have any trouble. He had told himself that he would make a change, he should not fluctuate at his words and take care of everyone as the best soldier of this group. Thus, Takashi slowly departed. As for qualifications, that is not important. He will not join the military police corps. As long as he graduates successfully and is not afraid of death, he can join the Scout Corps. Scout Corps Commander, we welcome recruits who are not afraid of death to join us. At 8 o'clock in the morning, when Takashi departed, he met Instructor Keith, who had not left the starting point of the test route. Of course, Instructor Keith did not need to participate in the mountain test. He had already prepared several other instructors in the camp at the foot of the mountain waiting for the soldiers who would participate. Keith looked calm, as if Takashi, who seemed to be on a trip and sightseeing, passed in front of his house. Won't you be worried about the final evaluation results in a few years? Keith asked casually. Takashi smiled slightly. No sir, for someone like me, it doesn't make much sense to try very hard in the tests and always finish first. Successful graduation from the training corps doesn't require outstanding grades. This is a reality that Eren hasn't seen. To go to the scouting corps, Instructor Keith, who seemed interested in Eren's results, also knew this. Instructor Keith showed a rare smile. Then why do you have to participate in the test? This test is not difficult for you. It's not hard for me, but not necessarily for some people. I appreciate, there are always some people who can't recognize their own abilities and it's up to you to help them in the process. Takashi expressed his thoughts. Oh. Then I'll leave it to you, Keith said and headed back to the base. Takashi shrugged his shoulders in a disinterested manner. Just now, he could notice Keith's worried expression when he mentioned Eren's name. Takashi walked leisurely to the end of all the groups. The first part of the test was fine, it was nothing new. After all, most of the people who came to participate were in good shape. The real test is in getting over that snow hill. Exhaling a puff of white breath, Takashi found that the sky was getting gloomy, the wind was getting stronger and stronger, and snowflakes were floating thicker and thicker in the air. It's snowing again, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the people across the street are climbing the snowy mountain right now. The sky was not clear at all, but you can still see some morning sunshine, but now it is snowing, maybe someone has some problems. But Takashi didn't know who yet. Takashi is slowly climbing the mountain, and sometimes the path on the mountain can be tricky. If you accidentally slide down some ravine, you will end up severely injured. Therefore, Takashi was very cautious. Although he has a lot of self-confidence, he can get hurt and does not want to make use of his wonderful hidden card. The routes gradually increased. There was more than one path at the foot of the mountain. There were tracks on both paths. Takashi chose one at random and did not insist on increasing speed. When the sky darkened, Takashi lit the glass-covered oil lamp. Finally, Takashi found a soldier sitting on the ground under a steep slope in front of him. Takashi trotted over and discovered that it was a boy. His face was pale. His whole body was shaking, he was bumping his right leg and his expression was a bit painful. Are you okay? Takashi asked. The boy looked at Takashi, a little surprised. Takashi, why are you behind everyone? Tell me what happened to you first. Only until now did he discover that this corporal was Liam, the one who asked him to be part of his team along with a close friend of his. It all went wrong, a rock came loose from the mountain and I fell into a ravine. Daniel possibly fell somewhere else on this mountain as well. Liam was more worried about his friend Daniel than his own safety. At first I wanted to walk, but it's impossible for me to move. Who were the members of your group? Takashi handed him the glass lamp and then took off his backpack as he helped Liam up. Me, Daniel, Krista and Yama. Liam said, wait, this won't work, you better go to camp and let some instructor come get me. One man doesn't leave another behind. It's getting dark, it's possible no instructor can find you until then, do you want to freeze to death? Takashi put down his backpack and carried Liam at a steady pace forward. But you won't be able to hold on like this, shouted Liam who was on his back. We are almost at the top of the mountain, and at this point it's not possible to go down the mountain either. Don't worry, I'm stronger than you think. Takashi smiled at being able to save someone in danger. Now, he can only pray that Yama, Chista and Daniel are okay. Okay, put me down if you can't anymore, by the way, thank you very much. Liam couldn't refuse, he felt relief to see someone coming to his aid. Even when he tried to tell Takashi that it was okay if he waited, he was dying of fear inside. It's a relief that Takashi's physical performance is one of the best in the training corps, otherwise Liam would hesitate in his words. Chapter 18, A Sacrifice for the Future. Takashi had been restless since the ordeal on the snowy mountain. He knew what he had seen on the mountain and was very familiar with what happened. When Eren Jiga, the protagonist of this world, transforms into a titan, rays similar to the ones he saw on the snow mountain came out in the surroundings before Eren's titan appeared. He recalled that in the story, as far as his memories could reach about this world, there were at least 3 titans that could fight in a way like Eren did at the beginning of the story. If these 3 titans were more experienced, it would stand to reason that their mastery over their titans would be more accurate than Eren's. After all, it was very common for the protagonists of their own world not to master their awesome powers until a certain trajectory of their story. With all that in mind, Takashi knew that Yama was a human who could become a titan. At first, Takashi was ready to assassinate the first titan shifter he had encountered. However, Yama's intentions and actions did not relate to the other titans who were responsible for breaking through the Maria Wall. However, there was no chance that those titans who attacked the Maria Wall would appear before the dissolution of the training corps. The dissolution. Takashi showed an absolutely shocked expression. How had he not thought of that before? Although he didn't remember what happened after the attempted capture of that female titan, he remembered details prior to that. The titans only attacked again when it was the dissolution of the army training corps, where Eren was and where Takashi had found a new titan shifter. Therefore, Takashi came to the conclusion that the enemy titans of mankind were among the training corps or the garrison corps. However, these are very important assumptions that change everything that is about to happen. Yama had the possibility of becoming a titan, Eren could also become a titan. If Takashi follows this pattern, what chance was there that also the titans who were the enemies of the story would be in the same place as the protagonist? While Takashi was thinking about all this, he looked at Yama who was sitting in front of him with a cold expression. Krista looked at Takashi with a nervous look. She definitely knew why Takashi had called them so early. Takashi looked at Yama and then at Krista. Sighing lightly he said, "Well, the test in the snow was a very dangerous thing. To tell you the truth, I'm still surprised there weren't many losses. I think it was the hardest test we've done so far, right, Yama?" Krista looked at Yama and smiled nervously. "Let's stop this stupid game for now. What are your intentions in talking stupid about the test?" Yama couldn't stand Takashi's behavior. She knew he was playing with her and Krista from the beginning. When she returned with Krista that day on the mountain, she knew Takashi might have seen something. When they returned to camp, there were no stairs or disturbances that would have proven her suspicions. Even Takashi had acted normally, fooling her suspicions with totality. Now, Takashi was in front of Yama and Krista. Quite possibly his intention was to ask about what he had seen that day on the snowy mountain. "You seem to be very impatient, Yama, you can't lose your composure like that," Takashi said with a smile that was erased seconds later abruptly. "Yama is like that, forgive her for insulting you a moment ago. Could you be a little more specific about what you wanted to talk about?" Krista said with a calmer look. If Takashi knew what had happened on the mountain, there was no chance he would be so calm in front of Yama. Therefore, she should keep her composure and not cause any doubts about Takashi's suspicions. Takashi smiled and said, "Susanoo, god of storm, ocean and battles, is one of the most important deities in the Shinto pantheon. Susanoo is one of the 3 noble sons, born of Izanagi, god of creation, and Izanami, goddess of creation and death. He was born at the moment when Izanagi was taking a purifying bath after escaping from the underworld, the place where his beloved was held captive. By sprinkling water on his face, Amaterasu, goddess of the sun, Tsukuyomi, god of the moon, and Susanoo were born. The latter emanated from Izanagi's nose. Amaterasu emerged from the left eye and Tsukuyomi from the right eye. When Izanagi divided the kingdom among his 3 sons, he gave Amaterasu the sky and the sun, the lightning, the sea and the land to Susanoo, and the moon and the night to Tsukuyomi. This division offended Susanoo, who wanted more power and felt superior to his brothers. However, he knew that facing his father would be disadvantageous, reason why he waited until he began his divine rest to face his sister Amaterasu. Hearing Takashi's words, Yuma and Krista didn't quite know what it was all about. Without having a chance to ask a question, Takashi closed his eyes abruptly. After saying that, Takashi pointed out, Susanoo is the most powerful of his brothers, a power that cannot be matched in this world. His fury and spite are enough to kill everyone without any complications. At over 42 meters in his perfect state, Susanoo fears nothing. Have you gone completely insane? Yuma dryly scoffed at Takashi's words. However, when Takashi opened his eyes, he looked at Yuma with his Mangekyo Sharingan activated. Now then, if you don't want the Susanoo to make a presence in this world, which one of you can become a titan? As Takashi's eyes changed, Yuma and Krista could see that blood-red color and the blades around his pupils. Feeling the room cooling down, Yuma was ready to do what was necessary to escape this situation. Switch to the Titan's body. Krista had a pale expression. She looked at those terrifying eyes of Takashi not knowing what to do. Ha ha ha, apparently you're a much worse demon than I imagined. Yuma smiled slightly and said, what do you want to know for, what are you looking for by asking that? Yuma couldn't see Takashi's true intentions clearly. If he was really looking to kill her he wouldn't have asked those meaningless questions just now. Even so, from Takashi's words, Yuma knew that he had the same abilities as her in a way. Therefore, if she wants to keep Krista safe, she needs to be careful. I heard that it took a pain trigger for the Titan to make a presence, a while ago when Maria Wall was taken down by Titans. When I heard that they disappeared at the mere human sight I knew that they were someone with the ability to change from human to Titan. Takashi said seriously. I am not part of the wall attack Maria, I don't even know how I got this ability, just one day I woke up and was human again. I don't care if you have that ability, all I care about is knowing whose side you're on and what your intentions are in our world. Takashi deactivated his Mangekyo Sharingan and pointed out, you know, the good guys and the bad guys are from different perspectives. I'm part of the people who want to get out of the walls and be free, but I'll make sure to end those who want to harm us. So you're just like Yuma. Krista was very surprised. She couldn't imagine that there was another person just like Yuma. It's very different. Yuma's kind and mine have no relation. I don't know if there are special effects when becoming a Titan, but everyone should have their forms and consequences. In saying this, Takashi knew that Yuma was very different and did not have the stereotype of a villain. In the original story, the Titans attacked the Maria Wall and it was only until later that it was learned that they were attacked by intelligent Titans. Both Eren and Yuma could make a very big change for the future fight against the Titans, for which it would not be beneficial to totally distrust Yuma. It's a relief that you have an open mind. Yuma is a very good friend, she wouldn't hurt anyone. Krista looked at Takashi with a sad smile. Yuma, I don't know how many more can become a Titan just like you and me, but if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's at least 5. Takashi said, if we want to survive, we must work together and prove the truth about Titans and how it is possible for things like us to exist. You are too optimistic. Why trust someone who is your enemy? If I were you, I would try to kill you at all costs. Yuma showed no expression on her face. I too woke up with powers greater than my imagination, my memories were flooded with specific knowledge of what I could do. Yuma, I seek nothing from you, if you think only of your own freedom, I hope you will not stand in my way. You can't imagine the power hidden in my body, stronger and faster than any other Titan, tall and ready for combat at any moment. Takashi showed a determined voice. Now we defend our freedom. The Titans attacking us seek to erase our freedom and kill us somehow. I will take it upon myself to find out who and why they attack us. If you stay by our side, it means you decided to fight together with me. After hearing that, Yama looked at Takashi and tried to evaluate his true intentions. This time she had no choice. If he became a Titan and gave up that liberty she got, it would be of no use. Looking at Krista, Yama was sure that Takashi was not interested in whether or not she could become a Titan. When she looked at those blood-red eyes, she knew that Takashi was also someone special and would not hesitate to kill her if she did something unexpected. I have no intention of seeking freedom or facing other Titans. The humans in this place would turn me into some kind of weapon. Yama said with a grim expression. Then it's enough that you help me with what you know. I'll take care that you won't be discovered. Takashi clapped his hands with a smile. Being a person who had seen the drama in this world, he knew that the protagonist could become a Titan, so I can rely on another with his same abilities. How could he not associate Yama with the enemy Titans in the series? Easy. Takashi would personally make sure that Yama is not a threat. If he discovers any relation with the enemy Titans of humanity, he will personally take care of eliminating it. It wouldn't be at all beneficial to force everything he was looking for in his relationship with Yama now, just as it wouldn't be smart to trust her entirely. For now, all he wanted to do was to have control and knowledge beyond what he remembered of this world. At the same time, he thought of Yama as a sort of main character who would receive her development later. But since Takashi mostly didn't remember what was in store for this world, he had to play with what he had in his hands. If this world doesn't want my help, I'll take my fight with a significant change, just like that voice told me. Takashi needed to fulfill his obligation in this place, to make a meaningful change. Well, you could be my future wife. Takashi looked at Yama with a mischievous smile and then looked at Krista, who didn't know what was going on. You can go fuck yourself. Yama smiled coldly. Don't listen to her, Krista. We could all three of us get married together and thus guard this secret until death. Takashi touched his heart in anguish. I don't think I can do it. Krista said with a flushed face. What secret? A voice came from afar, startling the trio. Mina was standing in the doorway with a smile. Mina, what a surprise. Takashi smiled and said, well, I didn't want to share it with someone else, but you should know that Yama is in love with my beauty, my face and my body. Mina showed a surprised look, looking at Takashi and Yama, who were blowing smoke from her ears. Takashi, I'm going to kill you, said Yama, who was stopped by Krista. Love is a strong weapon. We must love each other all as a family. I will make a sacrifice and marry all the women who wish to be by my side. Takashi raised his hands with tears of happiness. This time, Takashi had played with fire. Krista didn't stop Yama anymore and joined the group beating. Mina also showed a smile as she helped her sisters in the fight. Chapter 19, Everyone keeps secrets in this world. In the afternoon, Yama and Krista were walking through the vast forest near the base of the training corps. During the next few hours after Takashi revealed his darkest secret, Yama questioned himself many times to go far away. Even if he acted with a tough attitude that was the result of all the terrible things that have happened to him, she thought that everything carried a balance. This time, she had someone very close to her that she actually cared about. She had revealed her identity in the Snow Mountain ordeal and believed that Krista would reveal her secret to them all, but was surprised to hear that she trusted her. A lot has happened these past few days, I thought you would run far away and not come back. Krista looked at Yuma and smiled. I think the best decision is to leave this place. I can't stay here when someone else sees what I can become. Yuma said with a sad expression. She had struggled so much to find a way out. The only reason she joined the training corps was to look for Krista. After overhearing that conversation in the church, she thought could find something similar to what she was in the past. Don't say that kind of nonsense. Everyone in this world keeps secrets. Now that I am aware that there are Titan shifters among us, I discovered many more secrets than the others in a long time. Krista was annoyed by Yuma's words. She couldn't help but complain. I trusted you when you helped Daniel. You risked everything just because I didn't want to leave a partner behind. I'm glad to know who you really are. The only way for us to survive in the future is to work together. After hearing that, Yuma showed a surprised look before smiling with relief. All right then, let's fully trust each other and survive the future, but when I have to reveal my secret to the world, you must also reveal your real name. It's an oath. Krista nodded slightly. It has been more than 10 days since the snow test was performed. Today is the 17th of January, 848. On this day, after Takashi got up, he took a slow shower, ate breakfast at high speed and some time later tidied up the entire room he slept in. There are only 3 residents currently in the whole quad dormitory. Now it was time for days off. The training corps gives recruits about a fortnight in mid-January, so many people had gone home. Thomas had left a few days ago for his hometown to spend time with his family. Aaron and Amin had no place to go, so those recruits who did not want to return could spend the time training or doing some other free choice activity. After the conversation he had with Yuma, Takashi seriously thought that Yuma would leave the base on some later day. However, he was surprised that it was not that way. Therefore, Takashi was a bit more reassured by her presence and shared more time with Yuma and Krista during the subsequent days. It should be said that Yuma's personality did not change. She was still a witch with a poisonous mouth. Takashi, once he finished cleaning the room, slowly walked towards the forest, appreciating the silence of the surroundings. As Takashi slowly strolled through the forest, he heard someone calling out to him. Takashi. Can we talk? A slightly hesitant voice sounded. Takashi turned his head and looked at an unfamiliar corporal sitting in a large, thick-looking tree. It's a pity that the voice didn't belong to a beautiful girl, so Takashi felt a bit sad, but he still walked over and listened to what the person had to say. Do you have something to talk to me about? Takashi asked kindly. It's nothing, but I would like to practice with the 3-dimensional maneuvering equipment together with you. Please, I won't waste too much of your time. Takashi is not someone cold, nor is he an emotionless, thoughtless person, so he wouldn't mind practicing with soldiers excited to increase their skills. Sure, after the vacations you can train by my side to increase your physical and practical skills. It's up to you how much you learn, that's easy. Takashi said with a slightly surprised smile. The corporal was a little excited and said, Thank you very much. By the way, my name is Horatio Nelson. Takashi nodded, sat down next to Nelson and asked, Why are you working so hard to become better at handling 3-dimensional maneuvering equipment? Are you looking to join the military police force? Nelson shook his head. I want to join the exploration corps and work very hard with my 3-dimensional maneuver team, in hopes that I can avenge my father. It's just that maybe with my skills I can never make the top 100 of all the soldiers in the final tests. Horatio Nelson's tone was full of hatred and unwillingness. Takashi listened to his narration and gradually understood Nelson's story. Horatio Nelson's mother fell ill and died years after her illness. Like the original Takashi, Nelson was raised by his father. Similar to Eren's story, Nelson escaped with his father after the Mary Wall was torn down by the Titans, being one of the lucky few to escape that hell. However, they faced the common problems of everyone when they migrated to the inner walls: lack of food. Because of this, many people did not have enough to eat, and because of that their father was forced to participate in the first battle to retake the Mary Wall some years ago. It is known that in the end very few survived, so Nelson's father definitely died in that battle. Nelson not only hated the Titans as many thought, but also his hatred fell on the government of these walls and their absurd decisions just to keep satisfying his tastes. Many of the nobles had food to spare, food reserves to supply many people and families affected by that attack of the Maria Wall. However, the best decision they could make is to send the father and elders of affected families straight to their death. After 2 years of collecting stones and herbs in order to survive, after much time and careful thought, he decided to join the training corps to become a soldier. During all these months he trained very hard, but he could not beat more than 100 people, so he thought he had no talent or was not someone special to stand out. All his results in the corps were always in the middle, no matter how strong his goals were. Nelson didn't even dare to say publicly like Takashi and Eren that he wanted to go to the exploration corps, because he was afraid everyone would scoff, saying he would just be Titan food. After all, his partner Eren was very powerful, and to speak of Takashi, who was always among the first places in almost every test. Takashi agreed. He could do it without any problems, and it wasn't at all annoying or a waste of time. When Takashi returned to the dorm, he was a little excited. Nelson wasn't even a mosquito in the original story, just a background doll. He had never heard his name, but that didn't mean there was no such person. Nelson and Eren's experiences are somewhat similar, but he has no halo of luck, and he is not an otherworldly person, but he is still the protagonist of his life. His hatred, his reluctance and the sweat shed from his hard training are something real, nothing fake. When he returned, Takashi was in a good mood. Today, he accepted a junior partner who would train rigorously in the future. Nelson expressed his gratitude to Takashi for his help and called him squad leader. Takashi had always wanted to form a special group and always considered Thomas as a good candidate to start with, but Thomas was so closed-minded and fearful of the future that his ambition was to enter the military police force, so he studied hard and trained hard enough to be one of the 10 candidates with those chances. He hummed a song and, after returning to the bedroom, began practicing chakra management. He heard from his friend Sasha that Mikasa insisted on practicing boxing every day, which was quite brutal and not at all satisfying. Takashi felt that he did not have the destiny of a protagonist in typical Zyansea stories and consequently could not open a harem, but now a boy regarded him as a squad leader who would encourage him to become a great soldier. Having a woman in the future could take it easy. Practice hard now and he would not have to suffer a hammering in the future by the hand of a Titan. Chapter 20, The Power of Words. The days off that everyone in the corps received were quickly over. After all, they could not afford to spend many days away from the base due to the limitations of training outside. Takashi would never have imagined that there were vacations in a place like this, but on second thought it was a common occurrence due to the 3 long years of training. They could not be done constantly and without any days off to clear the mind. Even the instructors had to have quiet days. In the last few days, those who returned home arrived at the training corps base one after another. As for Eren, Mikasa, Reina, Annie, Yama, Krista and the others. It could be speculated that they had no place to return to, so they all stayed at the base following less intense training. Sasha did not return to Dorpa, and neither did Takashi. He only had a small stick hut in that hunting village. Takashi felt that when he returned, there would probably be grass growing in the house, or it would even be ruined due to the abandonment of the house, but according to his memories that was nothing. He could find another place once he started working as a soldier. Even if he has mixed feelings about that cabin, he couldn't afford to go back knowing that no one was waiting for him. He had to take advantage of all the time he could. He didn't have time to be a slacker or disinterested with training, knowing what in the very near future awaits him. The soldiers who stayed at the training corps base during the days off trained alone. After Takashi and Sasha went to the nearby city a few times, most of the time Takashi was practicing with the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment alongside Nelson. Young Nelson practiced a lot with Takashi and really pushed himself to push his limits. Takashi on his side did his best to motivate Nelson and teach him everything he knew and some deeper details about decision-making. As for what he could learn, it was up to him. Tomorrow a new phase of training would begin. The instructors returned one after the other. When Takashi looked at a very familiar bald head, he knew that Instructor Keith had arrived and the quiet days were over. "Hi. Takashi, I came back and brought you something to eat." Thomas walked into the dorm full of energy. "Oh, welcome back." Takashi, who was checking the condition of his belts and uniform, replied with a slight smile. He hadn't seen him for a few days. However, she didn't have the enthusiastic joy of seeing him again since she wasn't dealing with a beautiful girl. "Phew, it's still too cold, aren't you happy to see your big friend?" Thomas put down his things, slightly dissatisfied with Takashi's slightly disinterested attitude. Takashi didn't say anything. Thomas wasn't his girlfriend after all. Takashi put down the belts in his hands and said, "By the way, now that I remember, there is someone who will call me squad leader in the future. Right now he's training by my side, he's talented." Thomas was surprised by Takashi's words and asked, "Who, Eren?" "No, a boy from a nearby village." Takashi rolled his eyes. If he wasn't his friend and slept on the top bunk of his bed, he would have hit him already. Takashi stopped saying unnecessary things and said something important. "I just read the notice on the bulletin board. Apparently they will add 2 new types of training." Thomas looked bitter and couldn't help but complain, "I can't believe it. I just got back and I'm already getting worried. What new courses have the instructors added?" "Climbing and riding training. The first time I heard that word I didn't know what it meant. Turns out it's horseback riding." Sakashi smiled, slightly embarrassed. "Riding training will begin a month later, at the beginning of March, and these practices will last for a year. It won't stop for the whole year, but after a while, it won't be a key course for soldiers in the training corps. However, this type of training is not dangerous at all. Still, climbing training is a completely different thing." From the words of an instructor, Takashi learned that there were people who could be killed or injured at any time. In cliff climbing practice, the assigned instructor would, once the course had been going on for a while, cut the safety ropes to test the soldiers' adaptation if a similar situation ever happened when using the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. Takashi knew that this would mean there would be casualties, but death is considered inappropriate for fighting titans. This training starts immediately and lasts for at least half a year, twice a week at least. Forget about using the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. For a long time I've wanted to ride a horse, but that climbing training is something too cruel, inhumane. Thomas couldn't help but feel bad when he heard about the new types of training. That's not so bad. Is there any less dangerous type of training? The theory class starting tomorrow has changed. This time it will be dedicated to Titan knowledge. Remember to bring a notebook. We should be ready in case there is some kind of exam later on. It's okay, I understand. There are new types of theoretical and practical training. Thomas started to unpack his things with a downtrodden face. Ha ha ha, there's nothing we can do about it. Takashi smiled slightly. However, he didn't remember that Thomas had brought him food, and right now Thomas wasn't focused on remembering those trivial things next to new types of training. The next day, in one of the many classrooms about theoretical classes was Takashi. The training core students were divided into 6 classrooms. To be honest, every time Takashi studies in the classroom and looks at those neat chairs and desks, he had the illusion that he had returned to his days on Earth, as if there were no Titans in this world. The class Takashi is in has about 40 people, divided into 2 columns. Takashi was sitting in the center and next to him was Sasha. However, as long as everyone agrees, the positions could be switched. Daniel is on his left side, and there were not many people from the main story in this class. Many of the males in the training corps called this class Heaven class. Half of the class is full of girls, and they were all considered the most beautiful in the training corps. Takashi for a moment felt that because of his time with the protagonist of this world, Eren, he was blessed by the fortune of a protagonist, although Eren and his story is tragic. There were not many girls in the body, about 60 of all the remaining people. Just as the class wasn't starting, Daniel, who was next to him, couldn't help but point out, "Takashi, I heard this class was going to be about Titans." "Yeah, well, we better stop talking or we'll get points deducted," Takashi replied with boredom. Daniel was speechless for a moment. Time passed and the late teacher entered the classroom. Was he in the bathroom? Thought Takashi to himself. The Titans theory class teacher has silver hair and silver glasses. He appears to be in his 50s. His expression is calm and smiling, while his movements are calm. This person is actually a senior officer of the training corps, like Instructor Keith, who is mainly responsible for various practical training and today is in charge of the theoretical courses. He did not delay long in saying unnecessary words and went straight to the class after introducing himself. Titans are very similar to human beings in that they are bipedal creatures, with the same number and arrangement of limbs and functions as can be expected of human beings. From the human point of view, most feature deformed dimensions to a greater or lesser degree, ranging from slight abnormalities in proportions, to disproportions in head size and even bowed or curved limbs. It is unknown when they appeared and most of their existence is unknown to us. Our history tells us that their tough skin, vitality and being able to live without lack of food is what led us, mankind, to a dead end inside the walls. Then, the master drew a sketch of the back of the giant's neck and pointed to the 2 utility knives on the podium. This is a knife made of super hard steel of a thin shape, you know it. As long as it hits the vital part at the back of the Titan's neck and the position is accurate, the force of the cut is enough to kill the Titan. There are 8 blades in total. If there is any damage, you can remove the blade and replace it with another one. Remember to replace the blade again after eliminating 2 to 3 Titans. The Titan theory class teacher took a sip of water and continued. The known Titans are divided into 2 categories. One are ordinary Titans with predictable behavior, and the other are odd-shaped species with very strange behaviors. The odds of dying when encountering the latter are very high regardless of your size, so you should be careful if you ever encounter one of these. At the end of the question and answer session, the silver-haired professor took a roll call. Is Takashi Ackerman here? Takashi immediately stood up. The teacher looked at him and asked, some people now think that the super-large titan and armored giant that appeared 3 years ago should be classified as the third type of titans, and some people think they are strange. It could be a new species. What do you think about it? Takashi said, even though I wasn't in the Shiganshina district, I heard what happened and how things developed. Therefore, they might be the first titans with developed intelligence that humanity has ever faced. Therefore, it should be in a separate category. Everyone was stunned when they heard Takashi's words. The instructor even opened his eyes in surprise. Why? Of course, Takashi can't say he watched the anime. From what I heard, as soon as the huge titan appeared right near the gate, Shiganshina destroyed the gate with her feet, and subsequently the armored titan went straight through the gate of the Mary Wall as soon as it appeared. Both titans showed obvious purpose, and a large number of titans came in as soon as the wall gate was broken through. You should know that there should not be hundreds of titans gathered outside the wall in such a short time. I think they are very intelligent. More intelligent than any other titan the human race has seen so far. Suddenly, the classroom fell silent and, for the people of this world, this translation was quite insightful and observant. Of course, it was only limited to the training soldiers. The people in the scouting corps don't know how many times they have analyzed the armored titan and the colossal titan. The master smiled. I think so too. I used to be a member of the Survey Corps and I had never seen such titans. They are definitely not as simple as the oddly shaped species. Okay, class is over. After saying that, the professor left. Everyone listened to the Titan Theory class with great interest. It was much more interesting than the history class on the proper use of three-dimensional maneuvering equipment. However, in the back of the class there was a young man with a pale expression and softly muttered, "We have to eliminate him." After the theory class, it's physical training, and this time it's stricter. After equipping the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment, it is necessary to carry other items. In the afternoon, it's theory training on the three-dimensional maneuvering equipment, and tomorrow the climbing training starts. The quiet days were over, now a much more hellish training begins. That's it guys, hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Make sure you comment below what kind of stories you want to see next and any recommendation you have.